Hello and welcome to The Excerpt. I'm Taylor Wilson. Caitlin Clark is a phenomenon who has changed women's basketball, women's sports, and sports, period. But what makes her tick? How did a kid from Iowa become one of the most recognizable athletes in the world? And what does her presence mean for the future of the WNBA and how we talk about it? USA Today sports columnist Christine Brennan has covered the beginning of Clark's career and recently took a step back to write about this superstar in a new book on her game, Caitlin Clark and the Revolution in Women's Sports. Christine joins me now to discuss. Thanks for hopping on, Christine.
Oh, Taylor, my pleasure. Thank you.
So just starting here, what inspired you to step back and write this book in this moment?
I'd written a few columns on Caitlin Clark. I had not met her. The fascination with her, the crowds that, the capacity crowds, of course, the big news, Taylor, was the women's and the men's final game, the NCAA final in 2024, where there were 4 million more viewers for the women than the men. Even now, I cannot believe I said that sentence. This is NCAA men's and women's basketball. 4 million more people watched the women than the men because of Caitlin Clark. So this fascination was crystal clear. Why? I've covered women's sports and men's sports for more than 4 decades. Hard to believe. And, while I was covering the NFL and Super Bowls and Wimbledons and Tiger Woods, I've also done a lot with women's sports. And I've never seen this women's sports explode in this way. And the nation absolutely fall in love with a women's team sport athlete. Yes, tennis, Serena, Venus, what have you, but not to this extent in women's team sports ever. And so I started to write a few columns for USA Today. I was doing some TV work on this Caitlin Clark phenomenon, and really just wanted to tell the story of this phenomenal athlete, but also place it in history, American culture, Title IX, 53 years old now. All of that comes to play in where we are with the girl next door, all grown up and selling out arenas and having millions watch her on TV.
Well, Christine, I think a lot of us were introduced to Caitlin back during that 2023 tournament. Just incredibly exciting, that Iowa run to the Final Four. How and when were you introduced to Caitlin?
So the big one for me, on my iPad in my kitchen, not on press row, I happened to be watching the Iowa-Indiana women's game in February of 2023. And I was watching from an Indiana perspective because all my siblings and a niece and a brother-in-law all went to Indiana. I'm from Northwestern. I went to Northwestern. But, it was more like, can Indiana, a really good team, beat Iowa? And I knew Caitlin Clark was on the team. Well, the ending, buzzer beater, Caitlin Clark's flinging it from the parking lot. She's sideways, her legs are askew, and the ball goes in and she wins the game. And it's one of those things you watch it 2 or 3 times. My family, as much as they wanted to see Indiana win, couldn't believe what they watched and saw. Everyone was having this reaction. And I think it actually was probably better that I wasn't on press row, that I wasn't at the game, that I was in my kitchen in Washington, D.C., looking at it like an observer as opposed to a journalist. And I think it helped me understand how fascinating she was and that she's really, yes, a basketball player, but really an entertainer. She's the high wire act. And I think once you understand that, you can begin to understand the fascination that the nation has with her.
Well, as a journalist, Christine, you've covered so much of the kind of beginning of Caitlin's career here in college and now in the pros. And I do think we have to talk about what happened with you in the WNBA Players Association last year, if you don't mind. The WNBPA called for your press credentials to be revoked after an interview with another one of the league stars, DiJonai Carrington. What happened here, Christine, and how do you look back on how the Players Association dealt with all that?
I do deal with it in the book because I could not deal with it, and I wanted to deal with it and tell the story and also the backlash and what happened afterwards. As I think many remember, in the first game of the playoffs, DiJonai Carrington was defending Caitlin Clark, and as Caitlin passed the ball, DiJonai's hand kind of swatted at the ball, and then her fingers ended up hitting Caitlin Clark in the eye. And over the next day or two, the internet was going crazy. X and all the other social media accounts, accusatory tweets and posts about DiJonai Carrington. She meant to hurt her. Caitlin Clark, what was she doing? Why did she do it? Her fingers, pictures galore, millions and millions of posts and reactions. And so as a journalist, there's one thing you do at that moment. You ask the athlete about it. And most athletes understand, and covering the NFL and others over the years, I've asked incredibly tough questions. The athletes understand that this is an opportunity for them to hit it out of the park, for them to answer the question and have their moment to tell their side of the story. And by the way, Dejanay Carrington did that. She answered the question. I basically said, what were you doing there? Did you intend to hit Caitlin Clark in the eye or not? Because that was the insinuation by thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of comments that she was trying to injure Caitlin Clark. I asked, did you intend to do it or not? I think female athletes are strong and tough and can answer those questions. And Dejanay did. Dejanay Carrington answered it, saying, of course, she did not intend to injure Caitlin Clark. And then I followed up with another question specifically about other things that were on the internet. And while I don't base my entire career on internet questions, so much of the WNBA season surrounding Caitlin Clark and all the issues did kind of rise up. The foundation of so many of those was actually the internet. And so social media was a huge part of the conversation with the WNBA last year and Caitlin Clark and Dejanay Carrington. So you've got to ask the specific question and the follow-up to give them that chance to answer and put it to bed and quiet all the criticism. That's exactly what I did with Dejanay Carrington. I would do it again 100 times out of 100. And what really surprised me was how the WNBA, the players, were so unprepared for national scrutiny. As I said, again, are they saying that women can't handle these questions? I believe they can. I believe and Dejanay Carrington showed us that she could and answered it and tried to quiet the criticism. And that's what you do as a journalist every time. And as I said, it was journalism 101. And it's also giving the respect to the WNBA and its players that I've given to the NFL, I've given to the Olympics. I would ask those same kinds of questions, probably much tougher. I asked Tiger Woods and many others over the years. So again, very surprising that the WNBA Players Association wanted to ban a journalist for asking questions. And also, as a postscript, they failed miserably. I had credentials. USA Today credentialed me for game one of the finals. And obviously that did not work. And it's a shame that they even went that far. But clearly journalism won out, at least in 2024.
Well, bringing it back to Clark here, on her arrival to the league, we saw some eye-raising reactions from some WNBA veterans. This was a big part of the narrative early on. How do you view that moment after some time to digest, Christine? And was that a dynamic you wanted to explore in this book?
It was really surprising to me. And I did write a column for USA Today on Diana Taurasi's comments and Breanna Stewart's comments, where they were minimizing, taking a shot at Caitlin Clark, not giving her due. And this was at the women's Final Four, where, again, Caitlin Clark was taking an Iowa team that no one expected to make to the finals. She was taking them to the finals. And that's where they had 4 million more viewers than the men the next night. And you've got some of these stars in the game that were kind of giving Caitlin Clark a quick, kick to the shins. And, what were they thinking there? Kind of just throwing cold water on what is an incredible celebration of female athletes. Meanwhile, Diana Taurasi, as she is saying, reality's coming. And of course, now she's long since said, well, reality was coming for her because she was so wrong about Caitlin Clark. And her coach, Gino Auriemma, was just absolutely wrong, talking about delusional fans and that Caitlin Clark didn't have the skill set to play in the WNBA. I mean, as I say in the book, I'm not sure that there's ever been a sports prediction more wrong than the one of Gino Auriemma. But as someone myself who mentors a lot of 22-year-olds, it just was stunning to me to see a revered, at that time, 41-year-old acting in that manner towards a 22-year-old who loves her. And so you have Clark, the kid, going on and on for minutes like a veteran about the meaning of Taurasi, and you have Taurasi doing whatever the heck she was doing, embarrassing herself and the WNBA. And what was it? Were they shocked that a woman from Iowa could be the one and not a woman from Connecticut, which of course UConn, amazing, now has 12 national titles. Breanna Stewart, also from UConn, literally was asked if Caitlin Clark, if she needed a title, an NCAA title, to be seen as one of the greats, not the GOAT, not the greatest of all time, but one of the greats. Well, Taylor, you and I could come up with probably 100 greats, right? The more, the merrier. And Breanna Stewart literally looked at the interviewer and said, yes, she does need a title to be considered one of the greats. That was one of the great put downs of Caitlin Clark ever. And it was just ridiculous. And, the nation noticed, and I noticed. And of course, Cheryl Swoops with her flurry of falsehoods, extraordinary. What was going on? And I tried to get them to talk to me for the book, and most did not want to speak and talk to me about it. But the pattern is clear and unmistakable of either the attempt to minimize Caitlin Clark, um, to be critical of her, and that spotlight shining on Caitlin Clark is, we've already seen, shining on all the players who deserve the attention, who never got it, but are now getting it. And you've got these veterans acting in an absolutely bizarre manner. And so I felt it was very important to tell that story, as sad as it is, to see it. It was clearly what happened, and a big part of trying to understand why the league seems so unprepared and even so reluctant to accept, as I said, the greatest thing that ever happened to it.
Christine, part of the book's title here is The Revolution in Women's Sports. How important was the broader conversation around women's sports beyond Caitlin Clark, beyond just basketball, in writing this book?
For me, Taylor, it was huge because this has been such a topic that I've covered and focused on in my work over really the length of my career. And being a girl athlete growing up at a time when Title IX was just starting, I had my own personal Title IX. I had my dad. So I was a 6-sport athlete in high school at Ottawa Hills High School in the suburbs of Toledo, not because I was so great, but no one really cared about girls' sports. So you didn't have to specialize. And I literally ran from field hockey to tennis, and then winter was volleyball and basketball, and spring was softball and track and field. And I loved it. And but my dad and my mom were just so supportive of me as a tall 5'11" and a half girl at a time when most girls were told, no, you cannot play sports. My mom and dad were saying, yes, you can, from little age 5 or 6. That's my background. And so to see what we have now, to see what these young women have now, I mean, you can almost bring tears to your eyes. And I've been asked a lot, does it make you sad that you didn't have that back then? And, my answer is, we didn't know what we didn't have. So I was playing sports and loving it and wanting to be a sports journalist and going to Northwestern and on my way. But I've also then had such it's been so important to me to be an observer, reporter, try to chronicle this incredible rise in our country. I think Title IX might be the most important law in our country over the last 53 years. I realize there's a lot of competition for that title of most important law, but we're just beginning to see the breakthroughs with women who played sports, who are now running for Congress and winning. And the Senate, we will have a woman president many women presidents throughout the 40s and 50s in this country, maybe the 30s. The common denominator for all those young women will be that they played sports because of Title IX and learned how to not only win at a young age, but lose at a young age.
Beautifully put there, Christine. I just want to end here with Caitlin Clark again. What will her legacy be? How will we be talking about Caitlin 10, 20, 50, 100 years from now?
I hope, Taylor, that we will be looking at her as the beginning of something incredible. And we'll be seeing crowds like the crowds in Indiana. And by the way, out in California with the Valkyries, they're having incredible sellouts as well in the WNBA, the expansion team. But every team will have capacity, crowds, and we'll have secondary market prices going through the roof. And that all the little girls that Caitlin Clark is signing the autographs for, that all of them are going to grow up and probably be trying to, hit logo threes. Although coaches will be saying, hey, let's try for twos, as a whole generation are flinging it from half court because of Caitlin, but also because they have those autographs and the signed shirts and wearing the number 22. They'll also want to be, great athletes, but also role models themselves. And, that's the hope, that this is just the beginning. Again, we would have hoped it would have been Maya Moore. We would have hoped it would have been Cheryl Swoops, all of the great players from the past, that they would have been the ones with the spotlight and the millions of TV viewers and packed houses to the rafters in arenas around the country. But it wasn't. It's this woman. And yes, in a 74% Black league, a white woman, those are issues. I deal with all of them in the book as well. Absolutely. But this is the moment and this is the time. And again, the spotlight, we see the examples, the all-star voting, what Asia Wilson got 2 years ago, not even 100,000 votes. And now she's well into last year, well into the hundreds of thousands of votes, because that rising tide lifts all boats. People are voting for Caitlin Clark for the All-Star game. Then they're also voting for other players because they've seen them now, because they've watched them play and they respect them. And that's what we're seeing. So that is huge sea change in our country. All those guys, their daughters, their granddaughters, what will it look like? I think I'm very bullish. I think it will be terrific. And we will be able to have those stepping stones from Billie Jean King through the Atlanta Olympics in 96, the Women's Olympics, the 99 Women's World Cup Soccer. Onward we would go. And with Caitlin Clark now, the arrival of Clark, of course, Venus and Serena Williams and what they meant in tennis. But this is women's team sports, and this is remarkable. And we've never seen anything like this before on the team sports side. And that's why I think the future is so bright.
I really enjoyed this book. On Her Game, Caitlin Clark and the Revolution in Women's Sports is on shelves now. Christine, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, my pleasure, Taylor. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. I'm Taylor Wilson. I'll see you next time.